So today we're going to look at how scientists can help you learn from the world. So there's some really cool ways that scientists have found that we can look at different things from nature to learn about our past. So one thing is tree rings. So tree rings are the inside part of the tree that you see when a tree is cut down, but it can tell you a lot about the life of that tree. So for example, trees may show differences in how fast they grow due to certain factors from that year, how slow they grow, or in this image you can see from NASA, there are impacts from forest fires, from what it was like in its earlier stages of life in growth-wise versus later stages. And from the earlier image from the Natural History Museum, the tree is very old. But one thing that's really cool is what we can see from really old trees like this that existed before colleges in the US, some colleges in the US, is that we can take the data given by these tree rings to work back our history of environmental events. So let's say we don't have a written history of all the forest fires or all the changes in growth patterns for different trees, but let's say we need to take analysis of a certain forest to determine what has happened. We can take a sample of trees, look at their tree rings, and get a really clear image of what has happened in that area. So even if you go out in your backyard and you see there might be a stump still or any sort of trees, you can look at the tree rings, and not only does it give you more, if you know how to read it as the more detailed information, you also just counting those rings can get an idea of how old that tree is, because each ring represents 1 year of growth for that tree. So of course it's going to stop growing once it gets chopped down, so then you can get an idea of how old a tree is by just looking at those rings. So I remember my grandparents' house, they had a tree fall down during a storm. We went out and counted the rings, and it was over 100 years old. So they're really cool things that you can do and learn just from the inside of a tree. Another way that you can look at historical environmental events is through ice cores. So this is something it's a bit more difficult to research and have access to. Like, this isn't something you can go out in your backyard for, and a lot of times you need to have a lot of training to understand that, to go and do this research. But ice, like in Antarctica and like North Pole, if you go out with certain instruments, like different tools, to collect samples of ice. So what you can do with these ice cores is find concentrations of different materials such as carbon, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and determine what the atmosphere was like in historical times. So again, this isn't something that humans have been tracking for a really long time, so we don't have historical data because there weren't tools to take that data. So what we've done is found a way to do the same sort of research using what nature's given us. So nature has these records compiled within trees and within ice and other things that humans haven't been keeping records of, yet we can still learn from the natural records. Lastly, something that you can also learn from the environment is how we're impacting it. So again, when I was in the Galapagos, I took part of my semester, I was able to participate in research looking at the concentration, so the number of plastics that were found in fish. So what we were doing is we were getting samples from fishermen in the area. They were just giving us the digestive system, so basically the stomach and guts of fish that they had caught. And what we were doing was cleaning out the fish samples, and then looking at under a microscope for plastics. So it wasn't even large pieces of plastic that you could see with your eyes. You had to put the whatever was left from the inside of the stomach of the fish onto a petri dish to then look at under a microscope and try to determine the amount of plastic, the types of plastic, that these fish were ingesting. And so what's interesting about that research is they're looking at how that might impact us, because you think a fish ingests plastic, you don't know where all that's going to end up, so you don't want to end up eating plastic yourself. So that's one thing, is the plastic they're eating is what humans have created, because plastic isn't a natural occurring material. So it's something that we've created, and then if we don't dispose of it or recycle it in a proper way, it can end up in the ocean. It breaks down in the ocean. Fish eat it on accident because it gets so small they don't even realize it. And then we could end up consuming it depending on the way that it's processed. So it's really interesting to be able to see the ways that nature then gives us information. So whether it is about our past of history, looking at what our climate and our environment used to be like, to our current and future situation of how we're impacting fish, turtles, tortoises, all sorts of creatures with what we're creating and how we're using our resources. So the next few pictures are from my research at the Galapagos Science Center, where they have a lab for marine biology. These are images of a parasite that one of our fish samples had, and then this is a picture of the plastic thread that I found in one sample. And then what we would do is put that image over to the computer to then measure it and insert it into the database of all the images we had taken. The last picture is just a bit of street art that is showing the impacts of plastic use and how that can impact our marine environments. I hope y'all are having a great day.